Well, I think, one of the biggest misconceptions is that people often think of AI as the one big tool that can solve everything automatically. And I think we don't communicate often and clear enough that AI is rather a collection of technologies, a toolbox where you can apply every single functionality separately, or you can combine them, or you can even, use them in conjunction with other technologies. And that's the one thing. And the other thing is certainly that today, what we know as AI can be typically used for very, very specialized tasks. Visual recognition, speech understanding, or supporting decision-making in very particular areas. And people often don't understand that AI functionality must be trained, similar to us as humans, who also need to be trained when we want to learn something new. And so overall, I would say the biggest misconception is that it's not like you can buy a kilogram of AI and it will right away solve all your problems. Again, it's always hard to answer this with one item. I think it's two most important questions, I would say, in AI ethics. The one is actually, what do we mean by AI ethics? I think that we must come to a common agreement what we mean by ethical behavior in our societies, and what that then again means for AI. And I think that's something that needs to be answered in an ongoing dialogue. And the thing is that it may have different answers in different parts of the world because of the different cultural background. So I think that's the one thing. And the second thing is, it's not only about discussing about what ethical AI is, but also how we want to implement ethical AI. Because a lot of companies and also institutions and politics discusses about principles and fundamental rights that should still be valid even when we use AI, but not too many think about how they can make ethical AI a reality and how to govern it. And that means in technology, but also in the processes and with their people. So it's the question about what is AI ethics and how can we implement it. That's for me the two most important questions at this point in time. Well, like many other players, for me, research and academia can provide really important input and insight into the discussions about ethics and also the governance for AI. The other element is that, of course, and that's what research and academia are typically strong in, is supporting empirical studies on ethical AI. What's the degree of implementation in companies? What's the acceptance about managers, employees, but also society at large? What does it take to deploy AI solutions in an ethical way so that they are accepted? How much trust do you need in order to accept AI? How is such trust created, and so on? So I think that's another area where research and academia can strongly support. But overall, I think, and it's not only I think so, but I'm deeply convinced that we need an interdisciplinary dialogue and collaboration to create trust and acceptance in AI, meaning ethical AI. And that means all of us need to come together. And that's politics, that's technology providers like IBM, it's those who apply technology, it's the sociologists, it's the lawyers, the philosophers, it's research and academia, and of course, society at large. In the end, it's most probably the businesses and also society, or us as consumers, who decide who you trust with your data. And that's personal data probably in the case of consumers, and it's enterprise data in the context of businesses. And therefore, I think technology companies need to take their responsibility to create trustworthy AI or ethical AI really seriously. Meaning when they bring powerful technologies into the world or into the market, as the technology companies, including IBM, do now, then you also need to make sure that you do that in a responsible way. And that means you need to think about what we said before about guiding principles for AI ethics, but also about how to implement them with the right methods, with the right governance structure, the right skill building activities for their own employees and also for those who will use their technology, and many more things that make it a reality in the end. And of course, you must ensure that you comply to all regulatory requirements. I think that's a given and a must anyway. That's a really interesting question that we also discussed in the Commission for AI of the German Parliament. And we had an interesting discussion with an external expert who came up with some interesting research that is going on about how transparency as one element, maybe for trustworthy AI, creates trust, but also how too much transparency can actually reduce trust. So I found that quite interesting, that we as humans apparently need transparency to a certain extent, but not complete transparency in order to trust things. So having said that, I think transparency about where does the data come from that you use for AI solutions, but also about, what are the basic techniques used. This transparency is still important to create trustworthy AI, but there are other elements like explainability of AI recommendations, the assurance of fairness and anti-discrimination. Again, whatever someone considers as fair, that's the ongoing discussion we talked about before. It's also the assurance of data privacy, the robustness, so that no one can manipulate both the input data as well as the results. And all of this are core elements of trustworthy AI in my view. And this should be also complemented by using the right approaches while developing and implementing AI solutions and making that transparent so that people can trust that if you do a project to develop or implement AI solutions, that the result can be trustworthy because you use the right methods and project approaches to do so. I believe that we will see in the future a lot more, let's say, hybrid intelligence, meaning a hybrid workforce where humans and machines work hand in hand or side by side to solve problems. Because even today, I mean, when we are honest to ourselves, it's the case in many situations today already, right? If you look at search machines, well, it's more the machines that work here. But if it's also if you think about navigation and GPS systems, then we look at that and we trust that. But then, of course, we still take the decision if we turn left or right or move on straight forward. So there are a lot of things in our day-to-day life where AI is already there and where we use it to help us, even if we are not too aware of it. I think where humans will still be unique is when it comes to qualities like creativity or our intentions or setting goals or team building and teamwork. That's something that we will always be good at. But when you think about we use more and more AI in a hybrid workforce, I think what it may change for us or what it may change for the future generations is that we need to focus even more on our critical thinking capabilities and the way how we take decisions. And I think that's something that we need to make sure that we train our future generations in the right way on this, so that even though we get a lot of recommendations from AI systems, that we still have our critical thinking and the power to kind of overrule some of the recommendations that come from AI solutions, so that we can really work hand in hand and side by side. And I think that's maybe the change, how AI is changing us that we need to focus even more on some of our core capabilities.